Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekly reading report. It's time for my weekly reading report, that exciting program where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. And Roger, I read some stuff. I did read some stuff. So let's talk about the stuff that I read last week. I will break out my list. The list for the 500 book challenge. The never-ending challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones. Where did I leave off on this list? Okay. Book 327 was Superman, The Exile and Other Stories Omnibus, which was awesome. Book 328 was Rocannon's World. It was Rocannon's World, which I read out of this magnificent Library of America volume. This is the Hainish Novels and Stories, Volume 1. And Gareth over at Books, Songs, and Other Magic is hosting a read-along for the Hainish novels. And I'm taking part and reading the first novel. And I read the first novel, Rocannon's World. And it was really, really good. It wasn't just the first Hainish novel. It was her first published novel, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, which sometimes I don't, but early novel at least. And it was originally published as one half of an ace double, those awesome ace doubles, of which I have a lot. I don't have this one, though. Wish I did. Because Rocannon's World was excellent. It was really, really good. A lot better than a lot of the ace doubles that I've read. Not that those were bad. It's just that Ursula K. Le Guin is such a good writer. I mean, she's just great. And even in her first novel, she was excellent. I mean, just really, really good. And it had the feel, Rocannon's World, it had the feel of a fantasy novel. You know, you have this fantasy kind of setting, and you have warriors riding around on winged cats. And you have what is essentially elves and dwarves and all kinds of other fantasy type characters. They weren't exactly that, but they were the equivalent of that. And it really had the feel of a fantasy world, particularly the way this book begins. It's great, but it is very much a science fiction story. And certainly the antagonists in this book are very science fiction-y in that they are villainous characters from another planet, from another world, with spaceships who have come down to this world and are causing all kinds of trouble. And Rocannon, who is a kind of anthropologist. Anthropology plays a big part in a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin's books, which is no surprise considering that her father was a very famous anthropologist. We have an anthropologist in this book who ends up stranded on this planet and becomes a very important person on this world, Rocannon's World. It's magnificent. Short little book, but what a great start to this read-along. I'm really looking forward to continuing it next month with Planet of Exile, which is another book I've never read. Just about all of these books, in fact, all of these books, with the exception of The Left Hand of Darkness, I've never read. I don't know why, because Le Guin is so great. And I loved Left Hand of Darkness, but this gives me an excuse, this read-along, to finally read these books. Great start with Rocannon's World, loved it. So that was book 328, which brings me to book 329, which was Fritz Leiber's Swords and Deviltry, which was the first book in the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series. So this was originally, I think, was a 6-volume set of paperbacks. Eventually it became a 7-volume set of paperbacks, I believe. And I think that's it. That's all there was, at least written by Leiber. And so the stories as presented in the paperback set are not presented in the order that Leiber wrote them, but they are presented in the order that is chronological to the characters. So we have the barbarian Fafnir and the thief with magical abilities, the Grey Mouser. And this book has 3 stories in it. One story is Fafnir's origin story, basically. The other is basically the Grey Mouser's origin story. And then we have Ill Met in Lankmar, which is the story where our heroes meet. And what a great volume this was. I loved it. And it's been a long time since I've read Fritz Leiber. And so it was great finally getting back to this series after decades. I mean, I can't remember when I first read these books, but I think I was in my 20s. Who knows? Who knows how old I was, Roger? Much like Roger, I forget what year things happened. But then Roger has an excuse. He's thousands of years old. But I can't really remember exactly when I read these books, but I think I was in my 20s or 30s. Who knows? But it's been a long time. It's been a long time. And I like this book a lot better than I did when I first read it. I remember liking it, but I remember liking like all the other books in the series better. So we'll see if that's how it is this time when I read this series. But the first book was great. Leiber is an excellent writer. Really, really good. And we have sword and sorcery stories with a lot of humor, although they can be grim at times, but there's a lot of humor in these books. And the characters of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are just so well drawn. It's must-read sword and sorcery if you're interested in sword and sorcery. It's great stuff. Fritz Leiber, it's hard to say that he's really underrated because I think everybody that knows about Fritz Leiber realizes that he was a great writer. But you just don't hear too much about Fritz Leiber anymore. And so he should probably be read and talked about a bit more than he is. Although, you know, there are some booktubers here on BookTube who have talked quite a bit about Leiber and about this series. And Swords Against Deviltry was an excellent start to the series. So very happy I read that. That was fantastic. Then I did an unusual thing. I picked up a book, read the first few pages of it, and then put it down. And the reason I put it down is because the other day we got the very unhappy news that Shawn Stansfield passed away. You've probably seen a ton of videos about Shawn and a lot of booktubers talking about Shawn, and it was a very sad thing. But when I found out about Shawn's passing, I felt it was only right to read a book by his favorite author, or favorite science fiction author at any rate, which was Clifford D. Simak. So for book 330 on the challenge, I read this book, Time is the Simplest Thing, which I had handy because I got this recently as a gift in that big box of Christmas presents from the International Man of Mystery. So I got this in that big box, and I thought, you know what? I need to read something by Clifford D. Simak because, you know, in honor of Simak's greatest champion on BookTube, who was Shawn Stansfield. And I had never read this one. Time is the Simplest Thing. A great science fiction classic, according to this Leisure Books cover, but I had never read it. I'm glad I read it now, though, because it's an excellent book. It's, you know, it's not Clifford D. Simak's best book, but it's excellent. Packed full of really interesting science fiction ideas. I mean, there's a ton of them in this book. It's basically a man on the run kind of story, where we have an employee of what is essentially a huge corporation who is now on the run from them. In this book, human beings can't go into outer space because of deadly cosmic rays. It turns out, at least when this was written, I think this was written in 1961. This is before extensive space travel had taken place. And so it turns out that if you go too far in outer space, you'll be instantly killed by deadly radiation. And so human beings can't themselves go into space. But in the future, there are psychics in the future, are able to project their minds into other worlds using machines. It's all, the actual process of how this is done is kind of vague. Or maybe I just didn't get it, but they are able to do that. And one unlucky fellow, the hero of this book, runs across an alien being, and the alien being infects his mind with this being's own mind, so that when he comes back with not only his human mind, but also some of the alien is in his head. You know, he's basically got two minds. So he's no longer entirely human. And he knows that if this kind of thing happens, that something bad will happen to him. The company that he's working for, which is called Fishhook, will do something and he will vanish. There was another operative who did the same thing that he did, that warned him years ago that, hey, if this kind of thing ever happens to you, run. And so now he has to run. And so basically he's on the run in this novel. But as it turns out, in this far future world, deadly superstition has come back into the world. And all the people in the world outside of this corporation called Fishhook are really superstitious, and they're terrified of like witches and psychics, and they think werewolves are real. And so it's a world that has become haunted by superstition. And so our guy, who's psychic and part alien, is in deadly danger from regular people, because if they find out what he is, they'll try to kill him, as happens in this book. He's, on the run not only from the agents of Fishhook, but he's also on the run from the human population who finds out what he is. It's really, really good, and it's full of all kinds of really interesting science fiction ideas, all packed into this relatively slim 200-page novel. And it's kind of impressive just how much Clifford D. Samac gets into this book as far as ideas are concerned, while at the same time doing a fair bit of world building as far as explaining how this world works and the world that our half alien hero is in. It's really, really good. It's, like I said, it's not his best book. Not everything works. This book might be packed with too many ideas, but there's so much cool, weird stuff in it that it was a ton of fun, and I'm really glad I read it. So Time is the Simplest Thing by Clifford D. Samac. Not one of his most famous books, but definitely worth a read, I'll tell you. So I like that one a lot. Time is the Simplest Thing. So that was book 330. So those are the books that I finished. Book I'm reading now is Edgar Rice Burroughs' The Efficiency Expert. So I am reading every book by Edgar Rice Burroughs more or less in the order that he wrote them. And this was the next on my list to read, and I've been avoiding it because it's a book called The Efficiency Expert. And it's one of those kind of experimental books by Edgar Rice Burroughs where he writes something other than the super adventure-filled books that he normally writes, about Tarzan and John Carter and all that. So this takes place in a much more mundane world, and there's some criminal activity that's going to happen eventually in this book. I just started it. Where am I at? I'm like 40 pages into this book, 40 or 50 pages in, if that. And so far, our hero Jimmy, who was the big man on campus, has graduated college, barely. He barely got out. And now he wants to become a business success. And he thinks, no problem, I'll become a business success and make my father proud. His father is some rich guy. So I'll make my rich dad proud. But Jimmy, oh no, he has a hard time finding work. It's pretty exciting stuff, Roger. He's having a hard time finding a job. So he goes around looking for work, Roger, but he can't do it. He answers the want ads, but he can't find a job. And then all kinds of other exciting things happen, like a woman's car has a flat tire and he helps her fix the flat. Yay! So, it's not exactly Tarzan rescuing somebody from a lion or anything like that, but, he helps fix a flat tire. Basically, so far, this book is what I was afraid it would be, which is, a more realistic novel. It's not particularly exciting. It does have Edgar Rice Burroughs, excellent writer. He does some excellent writing in here. It is full of his humor, and that's always fun. But hoping something picks up in this book. I hear this book actually is not that bad. But I just want to get through it because the next Edgar Rice Burroughs I have to read is Tarzan the Terrible, and I know that book is good. So yes, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the efficiency expert. Haven't got too far in it, as you can see. I will tell you more about this book later. Hopefully some exciting things happen. But that was not all that I read. No, I read some other stuff. What other stuff did I read? Well, I am reading Spider-Man. I'm reading every issue of Spider-Man from the first run of Spider-Man. The first run of The Amazing Spider-Man. And this is the second epic collection for Spider-Man. Great responsibility. And what issue am I at? I'm on issue 27, which is the return of the Green Goblin. Actually, he returned in issue 26, where he managed to get the drop on Spider-Man and knocked him unconscious. So now Spider-Man has been captured by the Green Goblin. We've got the crime master there and a million criminals. So we've got some trouble ahead for Spider-Man. So recently, for my birthday, the lady of the manor got me a brand new iPad. And so I actually got for my brand new iPad Marvel Unlimited, their app where you can just like read a billion comic books. And I got that app specifically for a couple reasons. One is that I wanted to read not just Spider-Man, but I was like, if I'm going to read all these issues of Spider-Man, I'm going to want to read all the other Spider-Man comics, which I don't have epic collections for or omnibuses for, like Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, and Marvel Team Up, and Web of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man. I mean, there's like a million Spider-Man comics that I can't read because I just don't have them physically. But now that I've got this app, I could read all of those when I get to the right point. I think it was the early 70s when Marvel Team Up started, and Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man started around that point too. So I'll be able to read those comics along with The Amazing Spider-Man, just so I get the complete adventures of Spider-Man. And the other reason I got it is because recently I read the entire first run of the Fantastic Four. But I found myself missing the Fantastic Four. So now that I've got this app, I've thought, you know what? I'm going to continue reading the Fantastic Four from where I left off, which was the dreadful Heroes Reborn era. And so I read the first 3 issues, I'll throw one up here, of the Fantastic Four, the Heroes Reborn series, which only ran for 12 issues. And it's actually not half bad. I was kind of surprised. It's weird in that it feels like an adaptation of the early issues of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four series, like if they adapted it for a TV show or something. So they're rerunning a lot of old plots, but it's not bad, and actually the art is quite good. And I remember that about this series, that this was the best of the Heroes Reborn reboot series. Fantastic Four was the best. I think Captain America was the absolute worst. That was just horrible. So I'm going to read these, and then I'm going to continue on with the Fantastic Four after that, because, why not? I like the Fantastic Four a lot. And now I've got, I have access to like every issue ever of everything that Marvel did. So I'm doing that, but I'm also reading Superman every day. I'm reading Superman every day, and I recently got this as a gift. This is Superman Action Comics by Dan Jurgens, Omnibus Volume 1. And I'm reading the series that was called this begins with the series Superman, Lois and Clark, which is before the DC Comics Rebirth event happened, so it's still the New 52 universe. But the Superman and Lois from the regular DC universe before the New 52 happened, through a series of very unlikely events, end up in the New 52 universe. So this universe now has two Supermen in it, but this Superman, who is an older, more awesome Superman, because he's a Superman we all know and love, is keeping undercover because the world already has a Superman, and also because they have a kid. They have John. And that's how this omnibus starts. And I never read, actually, that series. And it's pretty great. It's pretty great. Dan Jurgens writes it. It looks like Batman is going to be in the next issue that I have to read. But it's pretty cool. Undercover Superman has this black costume that he wears. He looks awesome. So that's a good way to start this omnibus. And I missed all those issues. So I'm reading those. And it's actually really good. So I'm enjoying this. But that's not all that I'm reading. Because since I got the Marvel Unlimited app, I had to get the DC one, you know. So I have both. I recently read, I just finished Superman, The Exile and Other Stories omnibus, which was great. But at the end of that omnibus, you know, it finished off, and there's not another omnibus that continues on from that point. So I am reading a bunch of Superman stories that continue on from where that omnibus left off. These issues here, there's one there that I'm reading from the DC app, which has a ton of stuff on it as well as the Marvel app. And so I could just, you know, continue reading the late 80s, early 90s Superman to my heart's content on this app on my new iPad, which looks fantastic, I have to say. It's pretty great. So I've been reading that as well. So my reading of Superman every day is coming along swimmingly. I did get something in the mail. I got a new Epic collection in the mail. And it's a Spider-Man Epic collection. How cool is that? This is Spider-Man Epic Collection Volume 12, which has stories from 1980 to 1981. And this has stories written by, it was Dennis O'Neil, right? Yeah, Dennis O'Neil was writing Spider-Man at the time. And John Romita Jr. does some of his early artwork. This is his first run in Spider-Man in these issues in 1980 and 81. And, you know, they're not terrible, but certainly not as good as Spider-Man became later. I mean, his really good stuff came later. This stuff is okay. John Romita Jr. in this first run was okay. He was okay, but not his best work for sure. This has, issues 207 to 223 and annuals 14 and 15. So I got this in the mail. Epic Collections, of course, are exempt from the 500 book challenge because I collect these. So I got this in the mail, and that's pretty cool. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything that I read. That's all I got. So that's everything for now. Epic Comic Book Wednesday tomorrow. And then later on this week, I still have to open some I still have to open a birthday present and talk about some things I got for my birthday, which I was going to do a couple days ago, but didn't. So I will do that. And that's all I've got for today. I will catch you next time.